Heavenly Highway hymn. It's good to see everyone out there. We're going to be on page 196.
Absolute favorite song in the whole world.
Please.
Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be in your house this morning and sing your songs and praise your word. That should be with our teachers today that as they share the words they study, that we listen with open hearts and minds and apply it to our lives. And just be with all the prayer requests and help comfort them. And thank you for your son who really died for us. All the blessings you give to us each day. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
How you doing?
Good. How about you?
Oh, February. I've got my Bible now. Up, Goob, you got left behind. It's time to go, Goob.
Think he's gonna come hang out with you, Josh?
Yeah, that's fine. Come on, buddy.
I thought he was willing to walk you.
Oh, he's going for it. All right. We're having a tangent. We're having a tangent going out the door.
Here.
Oh, thank you. Kind of wild, but anyway.
It's odd. It sounds like weed whacker. I guess it is a weed whacker out there.
It is, yeah.
That's kind of funny, a tangent there, because we'll be diving right into some of the things you're not supposed to be doing on Sabbath. Although I think that's technically yesterday, but. Alrighty, so this morning we are going to ignore the screaming sounds coming from behind me and dive into Luke chapter 6. I feel like I need some background music to go over the background sounds there.
It's fine. Kids will be kids.
Yep.
Just have to talk louder today.
We always try to. So where we begin here. So we're diving into Luke chapter 6. There's parallels also in Matthew chapter 12 and in Mark. So verse 1. Now it happened on the second Sabbath after the first that he went through the grain fields. So the second Sabbath, this is referring to the Sabbath that comes after Passover. So that, placing it where it is in the year. So it makes a lot of sense that there would be grain out there and stuff, because this is the fall, there's food, everything's growing and happy. So as he went through the grain fields, and his disciples plucked the heads of grain and ate them, rubbing them in their hands. And that's really important note there, is that they're not harvesting, they're not going through anything, but they are, when it says they're rubbing them in their hands, when you grab a wheat kernel off of the grains, you have the husk on it and all that stuff. So that's how they clean it off, and then they have something they can eat. The problem is this is on the Sabbath. So in verse 2, and some of the Pharisees said to them, "Why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" And there's a lot that goes into that one.
Lawful according to who?
Yes, that is the challenge of it all. So what we have to keep in mind is at this time, especially when you're talking about the Pharisees, they are extremely...
Hyper-vigilant would be the
Yeah,
word.
we'll go with that. Yes, they are extraordinarily aware of all the different rules that have been laid out for them. And not many of those rules are really biblically based. They are traditionally based on the rabbis' interpretations over the centuries. And what they're really going at right now is this list of 39 violations of the Sabbath, which is called the Melachot. And I was reading through some of that this morning and last night. All respect to Orthodox Jews, but these things are nuts. I mean, they really are an entirely different level of extended things you're not allowed to do. And the reasons why it's in the list is, it's an interesting one. So in the commentary, they just listed a few examples of violations, which include sewing 2 stitches, writing 2 letters, or taking out food equal to 1 dried fig, which it actually gets worse than that. So this is the Jewish Orthodox website that I was reading through the list on, and it goes, the chapter that matters to this is reaping, which is where you go and collect food. So this precludes cutting or plucking any growing thing, and basically anything where you are basically affecting or placing ownership over nature. So activities like plucking a flower, plucking a fruit from a tree, you can't mow your lawn. Also, do not handle any growing flowers or plants, forbidden to climb a tree or to smell a growing flower. Fruit which falls from a tree on the Sabbath may not be used on the same day, and the use of animals as well as plants is forbidden, since there's a concern one might forget and inadvertently pluck a branch for use as a switch. That last one kind of threw me, that how would you forget enough to go get a switch to, switch somebody with. I just, but you'll notice in there that there's no biblical foundations for a lot of these. They are taking an interpretation and an interpretation of that. And that's what Jesus answers back here. That, our original requirement was that, God had worked his 6 days. And on the seventh, he rested because he was done. Not because you weren't allowed to do anything. It was a day to rest. And it was supposed to be a gift for man. And that was the same thing that Jesus answers back here. But the Pharisees had turned it into a burden. I'm just jumping through my notes here. So his answer, Luke 6, verse 3. But Jesus answered them and said, have you not even read this, what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he went into the house of God, took and ate the showbread, which also gave some to those with him, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. So that, somehow we never seem to dodge going back into Old Testament stuff, but that was one of the times when David and his men were on the run. And the point he's trying to make here is that there are exceptions. This is not a hard and fast rule of Moses that thou aren't supposed to do anything. Because, for example, you have deeds of necessity. David was starving, or his men needed food, so that gave them the exception there. You also have to notice that the priests were there working.
I'd argue that David wasn't anointed by the Lord.
That gets to the next sentence, yeah.
And technically, he can. It's not normal, I guess would be the way to put it.
Yeah, he had the privilege or the authority to consume that bread that was there. But he's pointing out exceptions here, that you have deeds of necessity. They're certainly the service to God. I mean, the Pharisees are doing work on these days, even though they're claiming not to. You have the priests who were collecting and baking that bread. They were working that day. And also, the exception for acts of mercy. You have things that you just need to do. In verse 5, and he said to them, the Son of Man is also the Lord of the Sabbath. Calling out that, as you said, he's the one that all of these rules were supposed to be serving, not servant to. Kind of hard how to say that one, but
You have the authority to do so.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the quarterly also calls out Hebrews 4:10. For he that has entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. So the idea here is not that it's a rest where you're not allowed to do any work. It's a rest from having to work. Some of the idea there. Which incidentally, going back to some of the crazy examples that they had, we covered reaping, but they had another one, which was the number 1 in their list, which is carrying. And it's...
You got the number of steps, it's like something ridiculous.
It's so many. It's too long to go over, but afterwards, if anyone's curious, it's just... It's a good idea that I feel like was taken too far.
So, like, what was the purpose of the rule of the Sabbath anyways? Like, what was God's original intent on that?
His intent was to have a day where the people could rest.
People could rest, but also probably to focus on the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you start putting all these rules and guardrails into place, you're now more focused on that than you are the Lord. And I think that's kind of what, as we look through the rest of this here, Jesus is going to kind of cut to the heart of the issue here and say, hey, we're supposed to be serving God, we're supposed to be doing things for the Lord, and then like in a little bit here, if you're going to prevent me from doing God's work and healing somebody,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not allowed on this day.
Yeah, the rules trump the point of it all, or the observance to rules that they created themselves. And that's one of the things I was trying to find as I was reading through, digging into the Orthodox Jewish side, which would be great if anyone knows. This is where I wish Tom was here. He'd probably yell it at me. Is, where they have any actual connection back to a specific verse or anything, and that doesn't seem to exist. It's a challenge, especially because in Deuteronomy, you're specifically allowed, as you travel through someone's vineyard, you're allowed to eat the grapes. You just are not allowed to collect them, but you can eat them as you're traveling through. Similarly, if you're going through a field, you can't reap it with a sickle or something like that. You can't just wander into your neighbor's field and start mowing down the grain, but you're completely allowed to just eat some.
Has anybody ever gone blueberry picking or strawberry picking at a field?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a messy business.
Well, how many did you eat and how many made it in the bucket?
About 90 to 1.
So whenever I go, I don't. We used to have a farm that was pretty close to our house, and they had acres and acres of blueberries, and they also had peaches, they had plums, they had strawberries. So we take the kids every. It was like spring or summer. I forget. When they got ripe. I think blueberries are kind of springish, and then the other fruit ripens a little bit later. But anyways, we'd go, and it would be like, okay, 2 for me, 1 for the bucket. And by the time you're done, you don't need to eat lunch after because you're full of blueberries. And so we might get a full bucket full, but we've also eaten a lot more than that. And the place there was fine with that as long as we stuck in pockets and didn't pay for that.
Yeah.
But you go through and you'd sample. Okay, well I like this particular variety, and they would have, I don't know, they had 10 different varieties. So I'd go through, and the boys would come through too, and we'd go pick. Okay, we like this one, we like this one, we like this one, and then you go and collect all that. But I think that that's probably pretty common for anybody that has actual large quantities of fruit or something like that. And you're not going to miss a little bit here and there as long as people are actually not gathering up buckets full of it.
Yeah, and I like that, a few thousand years on, that at least that part of it has carried forward. That we still share. And, so now we jump scenes. I just realized Luke he really does the Disney cutscene kind of thing as he goes through. So verse 6, now it happened on another Sabbath also, that he entered the synagogue and taught. And a man was there whose right hand was withered. So the scribes and the Pharisees watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find an accusation against him. So this is telling that they're already set against him. They're just, witnessing what he's doing. No, they're actively looking for things to call him out on, to get him in trouble on. And Jesus, of course, knows they're doing this. But Jesus knew their thoughts and said to the man who had the withered hand, arise and stand here. And he arose and stood. And then Jesus said to them, I will ask you one thing. And note, he's not asking the man. He's asking the audience, and specifically those Pharisees. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy? And when he had looked around at them all, I'll pause right there. So he's asking the question, of them, is it lawful to do an action, to do good, to do evil, to save life, to destroy? And he's also calling, because they can't really answer, because they're not supposed to be working. This is the Sabbath. But they're not there to take in his word or to learn what he's teaching. They're there specifically for their act of finding something to call him out on, which is distinctly work and evil at that point.
I'm wondering now, what if you have an emergency, somebody falls in the river? You can't pick them up and carry them out? Is that considered work on the Sabbath?
That's the oddity, and there were not very many exceptions in that list I was going through.
Yeah, what if a house is burning down? You just let it burn down, or are you going to go gather people together to carry buckets of water?
Can you walk far enough to get away from your house that's on fire?
I mean, so there's
There's got to be exceptions to these things.
Yeah,
yes.
Probably is, but it all focuses on something that we, as people, have problems with all the time. Where it's, if you have a thing that you love, that you cherish, and you take ownership of it, a lot of times you want to make little details of your own. Say you got a house, you've got some sort of workplace, or whatever it is. And so somebody comes through and they don't do the things exactly the way that you want. Say like you're at your job and you have a particular way that you're going to do it. And then somebody else comes in and says, yeah, I'm going to change this, this, and this. And you get all bent out of shape. And it causes all sorts of problems. And then somebody outside of that whole situation is like, well, it's just who cares? The work's getting done. It's like, well, why does it matter that that guy's using one thing and that guy's using a different thing? Both result in the same thing. And when it comes to religion, or when it comes to beliefs, it's also the same way. So a lot of times you find people that will take the word of the Lord and it's there and it's good, but then they'll start adding on some of their own things to make it their own. And when you do that, you interject your things and make them more important than the things of the Lord, and then you start trying to push everybody else to believe the same things that you do on those particular topics, because you want everybody to be the way that you're at, and then it offends you when they don't. So we see that even nowadays.
Oh yeah.
One of the big, seems like the next hot button topic is going to be translations. Which version of the Bible are you going to use? And I've had people talk to me about that. If you use King James or New King James or NIV or Living Word or whatever, and there is a group of people that will say, well, it has to be this only, otherwise it's not right. And then when I'm looking, I'm like, it's the word of the Lord. Now, to be fair, I think there's better translations than others, and some that are going to be more profitable for that. But at the same time, why would I go take somebody's Bible away if they're reading the Word of God and say, well, that's not the right translation?
The whole idea is that they're looking at it in the first place.
Yeah. And so it's the same idea here as it was back then. Where you try to take something that is the Lord's and make it your own, but you forget to give it back to God and say, well, this is God's, and I'm just a caretaker of it.
Yeah, and on that translation thing, that just smells of the Middle Ages there, where the only official version was the Latin that only the priests could speak. So nobody else was allowed to see the word. And some of the early translators were literally, they did not have good ends.
Yeah, we've gone over that. Pretty much every major translation has gone through all sorts of issues. Bankruptcy, people dying, all sorts of different stuff to get those translations out.
One exception, though, to that is the Swedes. The King Gustav, I think it's the first or the second one, made it a thing that they were going to do this, and they've been maintaining regular revisional updates every 50 to 100 years for the last almost 500 years. I like that as an example, and it's also one of those things is for those folks who are adamant about it must be King James or else. Well, what about the people who don't read English? They deserve to have a word they can read too.
Yeah, see, this brings out a good thought because people here that have been in Missionary Baptist churches for years, if you didn't start at 9:45 in the morning, you were unscriptural. So now they took that into if you only use the King James, I use it. But that's my preference. See, anytime man gets involved with something, he messes it up. God's word is there for us to read it. And what difference does it make what version it is? It's God's word. If you're comfortable with one, read it. If you're comfortable with another, read it. But we got away from that 9:45, and I know you remember that, right? Boy, and they just threw a fit about it. Wow, you're not scriptural. So now it's the same thing again with this King James version. And I'm sorry to say a lot of our churches are involved in that. They shouldn't be, but they are. So anytime man gets involved with something, he messes it up. God doesn't change. His word doesn't change, but we change it for him.
That's when all goes wrong.
Yeah.
So we're not any different. We like to harp on these guys. Oh yeah, they're being silly about their rules and regulations. People are people all throughout the age. You got groups of people that are gonna be like this today.
Indeed. And I think we have made it to verse 8. I actually can't see what time it is now, but yeah, I'll hurry along here.
25 after. I agree with you. 'Cause I got my bicycle to go.
Those are the things I left in the other car. So Jesus had asked his question, and obviously they can't answer his question here because it would out them for what they were doing. And when he had looked around at them all, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he did so, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. So Jesus knew exactly what they were trying to pin him on. And so everything he did was exactly within the allowed things a person was allowed to do. There was no rule that said you couldn't stick your hand out. There's no rule that said you couldn't stand up. Well, at least the first time. And he healed the guy. Didn't do anything obviously of himself, but it's not like the guy's hand just started working all of a sudden. And as he did so, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. But they were filled with rage and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. So even here, we're right at the very beginning of the story, and they're already on the wrong side. So now to some more useful bit here. Verse 12, the 12 apostles. Now it came to pass in those days. Oh, I did want to point out the word that was used there for filled with rage was anoia, which I found kind of funny, how it sounds like annoyance now. But the word literally means a negative mind, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to phrase that. Okay. Yeah, same. This goes back to the translations things. They have different ways of getting it across. And that's why I think I'm past a dozen now, different versions that I bounce between. There are too many some days. But in verse 12, which I just realized is kind of a funny coincidence. Verse 12 is the one talking about the 12 disciples. Now it came to pass in those days that he went out into the mountain, to pray, and continued all night in prayer to God. I think this is one of those crucial things we need to remember here, is that this is Jesus. And even he went out, found some quiet place, quiet time to himself, and prayed. This is, it's not above anybody to go pray. And, even he needed the advice of picking who should be his disciples, or his primary 12. Now, when it was day, he called his disciples to himself, and from them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. And there's a tangent here in the quarterly about the word apostles. It literally means just sent ones. It's the people you send. So there's other places we'll see the word used, but they're a different group than this one. That's all. So the 12 that he chose, there's 4 different lists, depending on if you look in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or Acts. But they're all the same people. And they come from all walks of life. We have Simon Peter, Andrew, his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon called the Zealot, Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who also became a traitor. And definitely a little bit of unsubtle foreshadowing there about Judas Iscariot.
Yeah, they don't let that slip.
No, at no point do they. So one of the comparisons here is in Matthew and Mark, we don't have Judas of James. What we have instead is Thaddeus. So the thought there in the commentary is he got tired of being mistaken for the other one, so he went by Thaddeus, which I can completely understand.
And that's the other thing, too. A lot of times these names are a little bit more fluid
Mm-hmm.
than we realize. So when you're looking historically at like a king's name, you find like 3 different versions of it. You're like, well, which one's which? They're all the same.
They're all him, yeah. It's an interesting thought of living in a time and a place where you didn't have a name given to you at birth that was written down, an official record, and you could never change it, kind of a thing, or you had to go through a huge process for it. It was just what you were called. And that these are all walks of life. So you have Matthew, who was tax collector, to Simon called Zealot, which was another interesting group. They were a political party in Israel that sought to violently overthrow the Romans. So you have a Roman tax collector, and you have someone who's,
Basically a terrorist.
yeah, in the same, and you have, there's other dimensions here. You have the fishermen, and then you have the other. I find interesting though in there that until we have Paul later on, his group didn't really include any of the Jewish,
Religious elite.
yeah. So but he has his broad swath, but it's an interesting swath of people that he chose to be his apostles.
It doesn't say it here in Luke either, but when you read the other Gospels, which we'll get to probably in the next couple of weeks on Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
he specifically walked out and found some of these people.
Mm-hmm.
Told them, come follow me.
Yeah, chapter 5, for example, is when he went and collected Matthew, the tax collector. And then he has the 4 fishermen.
We'll
Yeah.
find more of that in some of the other Gospels too, where
Mm-hmm.
he goes and he actually talks to a couple of people, seems to seek them out, which makes me wonder if he did it for all of them, or because it doesn't tell us all of them.
I
I'd
would say
imagine-
that there's no accidents of where he ended up at the point in time where the people joined him.
And I would imagine there was probably a good group of people following him at this point too.
Yeah, we have that right here, And he came down, verse 17, with them, and stood on a level place with a crowd of his disciples, and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem, and from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and be healed of their diseases, as well as those who were tormented with unclean spirits or demons. And they were healed. That just one sentence there, and they were healed. That's all.
If you go into Acts, you'll find that when they had like the nominations for another disciple or another apostle,
Mm-hmm.
they said, well, let's pick it from somebody that's been here since the beginning. So that the assumption is that there's been people there that have been with him since the start of his ministry all the way through. There weren't these 12.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we get locked into this belief that it's only the 12 guys that are with him all the time. Not necessarily.
No,
There might
it was a
be more.
crowd. Although when he was taken by the Romans, a lot of those disappeared too for a while. So, and verse 19, and the whole multitude sought to touch him, for power went out from him and healed them all. So now we get to probably the most important part of this part of Luke here, is the Beatitudes. I looked up how to actually pronounce that correctly. Then he lifted up his eyes towards his disciples and said, it's kind of interesting one, because he is talking to his disciples here. Blessed are you poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. And blessed are you who hunger now, for you shall be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. And blessed are you when men hate you, and when they exclude you, and revile you, and cast out your name as evil, for the Son of Man's sake. Rejoice in that day, and leap for joy, for indeed your reward is great in heaven. And in like manner their fathers did to the prophets. Although that little bit about the fathers did to their prophets, I was just thinking how many of those prophets came to an unpleasant end there. In verse 24, but woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. And that's implying that you're not going to get anything after this life is over, because you've got it all now. Woe to you who are full, for you shall hunger. And woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. And woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets. And I'm just trying to imagine what like a Sadducee or a Pharisee would have been feeling like if he was in the audience getting told some of this. Might be a bit of a burn. But 27, but I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, and bless those who curse you, and pray for those who spitefully use you. To him who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other also. And from him who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. It's a hard one to imagine, but if you get robbed and they take your cloak, which is also your blanket, your bedroll, the times when you're traveling, oh, here's my shirt too. But I guess it plays to the point that if the person is made drop to the point where they need to steal your cloak from you, they probably had a greater need of it than you did at that point.
Well, the cloak wasn't just a jacket either.
It was involved.
It was an important garment.
Mhm.
It's like you could sleep in your clothes, it used as a shield for weather, it kept you warm. There's a lot of different stuff that we do.
Mhm.
So, well, you kind of like, I don't even know if we have a good comparison nowadays, actually.
In some ways, it's almost like your car. In terms of, the utility, it's a thing that does so many things for us as we travel. We just don't walk everywhere like they did then, so I'm kind of glad for that. And then verse 30, give to everyone who asks of you, and from him who takes away your goods, do not ask them back. And just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise. I feel like there's large groups of people, this is where I'll step slightly to the political side there, who claim to be Christian, who have clearly never actually read 30 and 31. Just putting that out there. Coming directly from Jesus' mouth, this is what he said. But that's the world we're in. 32. But if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. I mean, that was kind of an obvious one. If you only like the people who are doing stuff for you, then or they're only like you because you're doing stuff for them, then what's the point of it? It's not really worth very much. And then the same for if you lend to those whom you hope to receive back, what credit is that for you? Because you're expecting to get, you're lending with the expectation of getting all of it back plus some interest. It's not that you're lending out of the goodness of your heart or anything. It's almost the opposite. For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. But love your enemies, do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward will be great. And you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and evil. Therefore be merciful, just as your Father also was merciful. Judge not, and you shall not be judged. Verse 37. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your bosom. And that whole sentence there, I remember going over this, I think we were in Matthew last time around, is just the idea that, when you're given something, the good measure that comes back to you, it'll be nice and condensed and more than what you gave out in the first place. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. And he spoke a parable to them. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into the ditch? A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone who is perfectly trained will be like his teacher. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but not perceive the plank in your own eye? And I always love that one of, is before you start picking on someone else for something, make sure you don't have, a giant version of that affecting yourself first. You have to sort out your own problems before you try to, I don't want to say judge someone further, but before you can correct someone else, you should have yourself sorted out. And he ends that that question of hypocrite with an exclamation mark. First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck that is in your brother's eye. And
There's a couple of things that people like to use on this verse that I think they get wrong. First and foremost, people claim, you can't judge me or you can't say what's right or wrong because everybody's a sinner, type of thing. That's not the way that that's supposed to work. There is a standard for one thing. But the other thing is that, like, if you've got a plank in your eye and you remove it, and then you're good to help the other person. The assumption is that you help the other person.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when people talk about a hypocrite, or what they should be referring to is somebody that has got the problem and they point it out to somebody else because it makes them feel better.
Yeah, they haven't fixed the,
Yeah. But how people like to use it is to say, oh, well, you are a sinner too, so you can't say anything about what I'm doing. That's not the way that that's supposed to work. And that's kind of, when you go into the other, passages that talk about this whole subject, we're all gonna have things that we fail at. And the best way to be a church together is that, we pick each other up where we're weakest. And so if everybody has a flaw, and everybody has something that they struggle with, we can't just say, well, I guess we can't judge anybody, we can't help out because everybody's gonna have, a flaw. That's not how that's supposed to work. It's supposed to be that
you rely on your brother.
you pick up somebody where you're strong. So if somebody has a drinking problem, they probably shouldn't be going and witnessing to somebody that has a drinking problem. But at the same time, I'm sure that there's people that don't have a drinking problem, and they can go and witness to somebody that has a drinking problem. And so that's kind of how that's supposed to work out. Unfortunately, people like to throw that word hypocrite around and say, oh, it's a blanket, that means you can't judge me for anything. That's not how that's supposed to work.
Yeah, it's there's this thing, people like to use everything out of context quite often. Okay, verse 43. For a good tree does not bear bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. For every tree is known by its own fruit. That's a pretty obvious analogy that we as people are known by what we actually manage to do. For every tree is known by its own fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, going back to the blackberry brambles there, nor do they gather grapes from a bramble bush. The good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. And I feel like we've said something very similar through a lot of the Old Testament things too. It's a recurring theme here that what we say, what we do, the fruits that we create are a reflection of what's inside. And then we have our foundation here, 46. But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things which I say? Whoever comes to me and hears my sayings and does them, I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building a house, who dug deep and laid the foundations on the rock. And when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently against that house and could not shake it, for it was founded on the rock. Which I don't think is in our song list today, but it would have been a good fit if it was. But he who heard it and did nothing is like a man who had built a house on the earth, or on top of the soil, without a foundation, against which the stream beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. And there's a lot of analogies we can build from this, and the same concept is used in many other places, that you have to, this thing right here, whichever variation of it you're using, is the foundation that we need to have and understand and use. And if we don't use it, then it's like it says, you just built on, like our song, you build your house on shifting sands. Well, it's not going to stick around very long. But that's the end of chapter 6. Next week we'll dive into the centurion servants, some healing, some messengers, and a lot of more good stuff. So any thoughts on chapter 6?
Too many.
Too many? Well, I think we have another Wednesday topic then.
We'll get there.
Anyone else thoughts on chapter 6?
I think Chris said it perfectly.
Too many. There's a lot in there that we need to just remember. And I'm afraid of how many folks seem to forget these across the board. But anyhow, hey, I made it with a minute left. Daniel, could you dismiss us, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful day. Help us remember to look to ourselves first before we judge others. Help us take this to heart, Lord. Jesus' name, amen.
Mhm.